Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots. Bootlicker shows, nuts, lace, arts, peasants, vassals. I am a useful idiot. Today I want to present part 2 of my videos on disinformation. And in this episode, I want to talk about what's called the Alinsky tactics. And this essentially is a series of strategies and techniques that are used by TV pundits, and they're well versed in this sense. Saul Alinsky was a moral relativist who wrote a book called Rules for Radicals, and it was meant for grassroots activists fighting the so-called establishment. But of course, soon these methods came to be adopted by the establishment, as is often the case. You co-opt your opponent. And the Alinsky strategy in a nutshell is win at any cost, even if you have to lie. And so that was part of his recipe for radicalism. And now we have this Alinsky method being used by so-called journalists in our modern age. And the fact that all these techniques are codified is what you should be concerned with. And that's the fact that you see these kind of behaviors and these kind of presentations on news and television and media constantly. And you may think it might actually be the personalities of the pundits or the techniques that they personally use, but you will find that they're actually all well versed in all of these so-called Alinsky tactics. And that includes everybody on the left and everybody on the right, whether it's Keith Olbermann or Bill O'Reilly. And they all use these same methods. So that should tell you something too. Much like the Republicans and Democrats are essentially the same, we have the left and right pundits essentially the same and using the same tactics, only a little more tailored to their particular bases. So let's go through the 12 basic tenets of the Alinsky method. Number 1 is power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. So it's easy to bluff when you're in these interviews and these so-called dialogues on cable news and mainstream media. And part of that is how you can easily paint unwanted ideas as too fringe and instill a sense of futility in those that would challenge the status quo. So number 2, never go outside the experience of your own base, and whenever possible, go outside the experience of your enemy's base. In other words, just go off on tangents. If somebody starts making too much sense, just go off on tangents. But make sure that you stay within the realms of your own dogma, your own political ideology. And that's the whole idea of going off on a tangent. If somebody hits a little too close to home, you just sidestep back to home territory. Number 3, make the enemy live up to their own book of rules. And of course, that's a great attack technique when you're doing TV interviews, is show someone's hypocrisy. Because in our soundbite age and television and public perception molded so quickly and so easily, all you have to do is use these book of rules and rub somebody's nose in it and show hypocrisy, and you've done them a lot of damage. Number 4, this kind of overlaps all of these other ideas, but number 4 is ridicule is man's most potent weapon. And of course that's what we see over and over again, particularly with the likes of the more aggressive TV media pundits. They like to ridicule, and sometimes it's pretty infantile. Bill O'Reilly, I mean, it's like a big kid sometimes. He's just so infantile. Number 5, a good tactic is one that your base enjoys. And for example, with liberal media, they loved poking fun at the Tea Party movement by calling them teabaggers. So that makes it fun for the base. They can have fun spewing a political ideology, and so those kind of coining a phrase like that makes it fun for everybody. And also part of a good tactics that keeps it enjoyable for your base is keep your talking points simple and fun. And we see that all the time. Sarah Palin, of course, is the master of that technique. Number 6, a tactic that goes on too long is a drag. So you have to know when to beat a dead horse to death and beat a story to death before you switch tactics. And you can kind of stay on the same story, but you can take it at a different angle, and that way you can deflect your critics. So once again, when I read these off, think about the fact that this is all codified, and these so-called TV journalists are very well versed in these techniques. And even if they don't have the academic background in these techniques, these are the techniques that they use. They may have it instinctually, it might be a corporate culture, but trust me, the same codified series is how it works. So, number 7, keep the pressure on. It's that whole Rahm Emanuel idea of never letting a good crisis go to waste. So, every little thing that pops up, the media blows it way out of proportion, and it hammers on it, and just keeps the pressure on all the time. Story after story after story after overlapping story. Number 8, the threat is always more terrifying than the thing itself. And so when television news and mainstream media lays out these stories, they'll make the threat of something happening far more terrifying than the reality itself. For example, so-called terrorist attacks. You have a lot better chance of getting struck by lightning, but they create a fear that every American thinks that some Muslim's going to creep up on them and jihad them. Number 9, the tactics of pressure create opportunity. And that's a great one, because what you do is you create enough pressure that you force your opposition to make a mistake or a gaffe. So once again, in a soundbite, short attention span culture, public opinion can be changed in a heartbeat. So if you can force your opposition to make a huge mistake, then you can take that one thing and milk it for weeks. Number 10, if you push a negative hard enough, it becomes a positive. Of course, we see that all the time, where these messages we get from the news are challenging the very ideas of good and bad, and who are the bad guys, who are the good guys, assuming moral high ground. And a created reaction is, of course, is evidence of that point. Number 11, the price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative. So you offer no solution, so you only become a downer. So if you have no solution, you can be accused of being a downer. Of course, once again, that goes back to keeping talking points simple and fun. And last but not least, pick a target. And that is when you go after an individual and not the organization, and go after players instead of the system. And we see this all the time too. So anyway, there's just a quick snapshot, and I tried to make it as direct as possible so that it'll be easy to recognize these techniques once you're familiar with them, just like the ideas I talked about in the last video on disinformation. And this is how, once again, what appears to be just normal reality is a series of distortions and very calculated, very codified set of essentially creating another propaganda tool. So think about that. Alinsky's strategy: win at any cost, even if you have to lie. Boy, does that sound familiar. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.